The sky was a dusky canvas stretched tight. Dirty grey clouds breezing by like cigar smoke in a speakeasy. Her eyes intense, afraid. She knew something was about to happen, but she didn't want to play her hand too soon or with the wrong person. You see, they're talking about a heist, mister. A real steal. They say it's good money for those that are involved, but not every one can be. Eyes up and down. I could see from the way she nervously propped herself up at the bar. She was earnest. Perhaps not entirely honest, but she believed what she was telling me. Okay, Toots, what's the score? How do I get in on this action? Alpha draft. Right, that's the end of that. So, North America failed to have any team qualify for IEM Katowice, which is not a major, even though in past years it was, although it was actually ESL 1 at the time. But it is a tournament that's got a lot of prize money and a lot of the best teams in the world there. So it's not only shocking that North America will have no representatives, because obviously the way they could have had a team invited is if they'd had a team in the top 8 of the last major, but it's been a number of majors since North America had a team make the playoffs, and they also could have had a team win the North American qualifier, but actually the second best Brazilian team, formerly Games Academy, now Tempo Storm, won that spot, beating out teams like Liquid and Cloud9 to get to do so. So obviously, this is a dark time for NA. There's just been this mini NA shuffle, which wasn't really very drastic. It was a few like bit players moving around teams, and most teams not getting stronger, with the exception of Liquid getting Simple, but he still has to be integrated into the lineup. And so nothing drastically has changed, and as a result, NA's not particularly advanced forwards. Like, there's no obvious team that's going to do really well from NA. I mean, in the case of CLG, the team that had done most well recently, like making top 4 at, well, 4th actually, at Game Show Global Esports Cup, part of why they were able to do so, which people kind of missed, was that they were able to use their new in-game leader, Peter, who's the coach, as the 6th man to be the in-game leader at that tournament, whereas they couldn't really do that to the same degree for this sort of a qualifier. So we've got to ask ourselves, how's NA going to get out of this situation? What can they even do? And so that's why I make this video. That's why I say, dream the impossible dream, North America, because the pieces are there. The opportunities are there. The paths to success, multiple and myriad that they are there. You have to uncover them. You have to have the boldness to go out there and do what must be done. You have to have the courage to do what must be done. And that means roster moves. That means getting past petty personal conflicts and past histories and difficulties between certain people who would fit together great in the game, but refuse to on a personal level. And so I want to tell you a story about the creation of the greatest 1.6 team in history. Because if you know anything about the history of 1.6, you probably know that the country that produced the most great teams in history was Sweden. Every year they had a contender for the best in the world, if not a major winner, if not the best team in the year. But the team that is the greatest of all time, in my opinion, is Natus Vincer, Na'Vi, the Ukrainian super team that dominated 2010 and were very good still in 2011. And a decent team in 2012. Still top 3, but not contending and really winning titles. So, to tell you the story of Na'Vi and explain why this is relevant to people in modern day 2016 in North American Counter-Strike Global Offensive, I have to explain to you the context of where the Ukrainian scene was when Na'Vi arose and won all those titles. So, Ukraine was never an elite country in Counter-Strike before Na'Vi. In fact, they were never even relevant as a country that would produce a team that was ever going to place top 4, that was ever going to be a real dangerous threat in a quarterfinal. They were utterly irrelevant, and if you'd have made a list of the greatest countries in history, you would have had maybe 10 before you even got to Na'Vi. The only result of any real note in the history of Counter-Strike for Ukraine began, in terms of an all-Ukrainian lineup, in 2007. In 2007, this team, Amazing Gaming, A-Gaming, had a miracle fluke run to win the bronze medal at World Cyber Games 2007, one of the majors of the year. A very stacked tournament, and somehow they stole the bronze medal. Now, this lineup didn't feature any of the superstars who would be in Na'Vi. It didn't feature Marklov, the best player in the history of Ukraine, the best player of Na'Vi. It didn't feature Edward, the Pistol King, one of the most skilled players to ever come out of Ukraine. It featured Starix, but Starix was the third man, the hybrid AWP rifle guy within Na'Vi, who was more in sort of a Crims type role. It featured Zawok, however you're supposed to say his name, who actually was most recently doing some analysis work for Starladder on the Russian language desk. It had Blade, who was the in-game leader, and to this day is the in-game leader of Flipside, and one of the great in-game leaders in terms of that region, but has never had massive success beyond this result. So you look at the people they had in this team, it's not even like this was the seeds of Na'Vi. It was one player who went on to be going Na'Vi. In the tournament, it was an absolute miracle fluke win. They had lost to EMG, Amazing Gaming was actually the name of that team, and that was the best NA team at the time, and most of those players were let go on to make Evil Geniuses, but not the Evil Geniuses you're thinking of. They lost to this team in the group stage. Then, in the round of 8, they managed to beat Rockat, which was a Finnish guys who was like a Finnish all-star team almost, who were considered one of the favourites for the tournament, and had just beaten the Poles of Pentagram and Neo and Taz and those guys. So they thought by winning that match that they had an easy path to the final now. They just beat them 2-1, and the Finns had many chances to win the series, and there was some admin fuckery on train that stopped the Finns winning the series. So they managed to flukily get past that to the top 4 finish. In the semi-finals, they meet Emulate, and they were close to getting through because Emulate would have shocked themselves. They were a massive fluke when they went and won the tournament, but they don't win that match. In the third place decider for the medal, they play Amazing Gaming again, the team that had beaten them in the group stage, and this time they beat them 2-0. Now, to even get to that point and win the medal, they needed Fnatic to go out in the group stage, as they did. They needed PGS to lose to Rockat, because PGS almost certainly would have beaten A Gaming. They needed Emulate to beat the German super team that was actually very skilled players and that they beat in the first round. Otherwise, none of this happens. They never even get that result. So even the one big result in history was considered a massive fluke and never was replicated again by this same core lineup. Then, in the years later, you had this Virtus Pro lineup that was actually mainly Russian players, and then Zeus and Edward. And Edward was very skilled at the time. Zeus was just an okay fragger. It was mainly about Edward and Lex and these guys in Virtus Pro, but they were still a tier 2 team. They were never a prop tier 1 team. They were never contending to be the best team in the world. They would have the odd result that was good. Then you had Hellraisers, which was Markelov's team, playing with Angel, etc. And they were good, and they were good for a while, and eventually they even got Edward and Markelov together briefly, but that's it. All that really happened is they were all tier 2 or tier 3 teams, and really, those teams were just about showing us Markelov and Edward are fantastic players. Edward particularly looked very good at the time. Markelov was looking good and like a rising talent, but he hadn't quite blossomed at the time like he would in Na'Vi. So all we saw was Ukraine has a couple of star talents, but actually the old guys, Starix, Blade, those guys had sort of started to fall away, and they'd been overtaken by these guys, and you thought there's no way that a team's ever going to come from Ukraine and be the best team in the world. No one would have ever conceived of that. But here's what happened. Here's the story of how Na'Vi was made and became the greatest 1.6 team in history, despite having all these disadvantages in their scene. So there was a man who was around in the CIS region, which is the Commonwealth Independent States. It's like Kazakhstan, Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, like these sorts of countries, ex-Soviet countries, basically. In this area, there was a guy whose in-game alias was Arbalet, and he was this rich, like, oil magnate or something from Kazakhstan. And his son was into Counter-Strike. He was into Age of Empires, actually. And so he got into esports, and because his son was into Counter-Strike, he got into that as well. And he started to put on tournaments within this region. And so what he did is, he wanted some teams to represent the CIS region, to show that there were great players in the CIS region, and he'd give them the resources to succeed. So he went to Starix. The guy I said was one of the best players on that A Gaming team, Amazing Gaming, that won the bronze at WCG 2007. He went to him. He didn't go to Markelov. He didn't go to Edward. He didn't go to these players who were having more success and were very skilled. He went to Starix, the veteran. And he said to Starix, a very smart player, he said to him, I'm going to give you all the sponsorship you need to make an organization, what would eventually become Na'Vi. And what I want you to do, this conversation happens in like December or November of 2009. And he basically says to him, I'm going to give you all the resources you need, a full salary, everything, all the money to go around the world to the tournaments, but you have to make this a Ukrainian super team. And to be a super team, it has to be the right players, regardless of personal differences. Put aside all personality, all differences, all clashes, and get everyone on the right page. I'm going to pay you the salaries, you're going to play properly, you're going to be pros, you're going to have a team house to play from, and you're going to go to all the events, and you're going to represent and do as best as you can. And so Starix took that to heart. And as a result, he didn't go and get people that he knew from A Gaming. He didn't just go and get people that he'd played with recently. He went and he put together the best team. So he got Markelov and Edward, the two most skilled players in Ukraine. He got Zeus to be the in-game leader, even though actually at that point in time, Zeus wouldn't be the obvious choice as an in-game leader. He wasn't known as some great in-game leader. He was just some okay in-game leader from Kirchnet. Blade would have probably been the better pick, but maybe Blade wasn't the right pick for this team. So he took Zeus. And then he took in, here's the key thing, as the last player, he took in Senya. Now Senya at a time was someone no one wanted. He was an okay player who'd had his chance in like A gaming and other teams, and had failed miserably. In fact, he even had a game where he went like 0-16 or something crazy, or 0-15, and was absolute laughing stock and considered like, don't ever give him a chance again. He'll never be a top player. But here's the thing, he ended up, all these players ended up being some of the best at their roles. Zeus, a fantastic in-game leader at studying the game and then coming up with strats on the fly. Markov, the best big game player in the world, dominated all the major finals. Edward, the god of pistol rounds, giving you those early round wins so you'd get maps and you'd get leads on people. Zeus, I've already said. Starix, incredibly smart player, can play hybrid style as well. And then Senya ended up being impossibly invaluable in a way you could have never predicted. Because he was the support player, yet at one map, Train, outside alley position as CT, he was the best in the world at that position. Kind of like how Taz now in CSGO isn't even vaguely one of the best players in the world, but on Train inside CT position, lower ramp, he's one of the best in the world. So as a result, Train was their home map, and then they were unbeatable on Train almost. And on top of that, Senya was a really great motivational guy who never gave up, who never got beaten down, even though he was the worst member in the team. He always had the mental fortitude to battle through. He's very good in clutch situations as a result, and he was a decent fragger for someone who wasn't that skilled. So as a result of putting the right team together and then having all the resources, they accomplished absolutely staggering greatness. In 2010, they won all three majors. They won the IEM Global Finals, they won ESWC, and they won the World Cyber Games Gold Medal. No one in history had ever won all of the majors in a year. This Ukrainian team did it, after no Ukrainian team ever even making the final of a major before that. They won the most prize money in history that year. They won numerous tournaments that year. They were the team of the year, and they were, in my opinion, the greatest team ever, because that was still a very competitive year of Counter-Strike in 1.6. And so you can see how they accomplished this. They put aside their differences, they used their resources, they got the players to work together, and they worked towards the goal of being the best, not their own petty conflicts and their own little selfish reasons as to why they want to do something and why they want to play with this guy here. If NA puts aside these differences and these aspects and uses the resources of the talent pool and the money that they have and the practice opportunities, they could have a team that could be, okay, I don't know that they could be like a Na'Vi and be the greatest team of all time, but they could be one of the best in the world, one of the 4 best teams in the world. Consider this. Teams like CLG, Counter Logic Gaming, their big problem throughout their whole tenure in 2015, they try to keep players out of friendship. And so they wouldn't cut FNS from the team. When it was obvious at CVO Pro Season 7, when they didn't have him, they did quite well, he was a dead weight. Instead, they accommodated him by giving him a lurking role, made Cutler like the in-game leader, ruined Cutler's game a bit, and FNX was just average, and now he's gone anyway. They didn't cut Hazed at any point in time. They would never consider doing so. And yet they needed more firepower. They wouldn't cut Tariq, even though he was underperforming a lot, and they needed firepower, and he's taking a firepower role, having all these spots, even AWPing some of the time, and he's not getting the kills they need. Friendship stopped that team from, they got to a good level, a consistent level, they got their team play down, they got to an okay, decent level, and then they ruined some aspects of it, and they never went beyond that. Partly because of friendship aspects. Teams like Cloud9 continued to ignore problem players. They kept Semphis in the team for way too long when he was counteracting Sean Gares' effect. They kept nothing in the team for so long when he wouldn't play the proper roles and he wasn't able to have the kind of impact that you needed to have his problems associated with him. They have to have teams that are willing to get the best talent, to make the commitment to say, I'm going to buy this talent if I need to. I'm going to spend whatever I need to get this talent together. Because if I do, we can be more than the sum of our parts. It's not looking at the roster now and going, this could be something. It's putting together a great roster and going, now let's go for it. Let's go for the world title. Let's go for #1. Let's dream the impossible dream. Players have to be willing to do what it takes. So Team Liquid could have had a lineup. A lot of people might not know this. There could have been a lineup where before Hiko joined Neelam, he was already talking with Team Liquid, and he was talking with Cloud9, he was talking with CLG about potential lineups that he could have. And at the time, it was him and Skadoodle with a package deal. They were going to go and make a super team themselves. There could have been a lineup if they'd left the Team Liquid organization, which would have been Fogley, Nitro, Adren, Hiko, and Skadoodle. That could have been a real lineup. So forget all the stuff they had to go through in 2015 and getting simple now. That could have been a lineup already that could have been a fantastic team. Didn't happen because the Team Liquid players, including Adren, wanted to stay with the organization. They wouldn't take a chance and go elsewhere and dream the impossible dream, essentially. And so as a result, Skadoodle went after Cloud9, the talent got split up again, and then we had some good teams but not great teams. Someone like Shroud has to say, yes, I'm going to build my brand, I'm going to have a streaming presence, etc., but I can't ever let that come at the expense of the competitive side. I have to be one of the best in the competitive side, and then I can stream us on the side. That can never be my primary focus, the streaming aspect. It can never distract me, and it can never be where I practice a certain way on stream and I don't play that way in the game. That can't happen. It's so fantastic. The skill doesn't need to happen. He can practice the way he does on stream, the way he's going to win a game, and it will be so skilled that you'd still want to watch it anyway. There can't be a situation where someone like Kusta has all this right. He is the legit rising talent. Forget Stewie 2K. Forget some of the other people like Desi who have massive personality issues. Kusta's the guy who doesn't have the shit talking and has the skills and has started to show it and has the pedigree now and people want to play with him and people want him on all these top teams. Why isn't he on a top team? He doesn't want to play on a top team. He wants to stay with the team that he was with before and he wants to stay with his friends and he wants to waste this part of his potential here. And yeah, he wants to go up, but then he's not going to be a best player, is he? He's not going to be on the great team, is he? Imagine some rising Swedish talent getting an offer from Fnatic to join them and say, nah, I think I'll just stay with my friends, actually. Imagine some Polish player who's getting really talented and people all want to play with him and then Virtus Pro say, hey, come and play with us. And he goes, you know what? I'll stay in CSGO Lounge, mate. Imagine a Ukrainian player who gets really good, think of a simple type character, and Na'Vi says, you know what, come on, join our team. And he go, you know what, forget that. I'd rather play in this third best team in Ukraine. It wouldn't happen. It's almost inconceivable. Yet this happens in NA. This happens with a player like Kusta. They don't even make the players themselves don't make the commitment to greatness. They want to have fun and earn some money and just maybe do well if things go really well. But is a fucking NME lineup going to win a major? No, it is not. There's no chance. So it's a waste of everyone's time. Think about this. With all the talent that exists, imagine I was in a Na'Vi Arbalest type situation. I have all the funding and I have to make some lineups. Now, I'm not going to make ridiculous lineups like my super team lineup that I'll link it up there that I did from NA because that involved players from 4 different teams. I'm going to take the 3 big cores right now of Cloud9, CLG, and Team Liquid. I'm going to tweak a few players and imagine that no personality issues exist. Or if they do, we're going to ignore them and we're going to just make these lineups and we're going to do what Na'Vi did, which is overcome personal differences and become a great team. These are the 3 lineups I will create now out of all the talent in the scene. And you'll see how all of these lineups are probably better than the lineups that exist right now for these teams and could already start to do real work. So let's start with Cloud9. Skadoodle, obviously I'm keeping him. He's my main AWPer. He's my superstar player. When he's at his peak, he's not at his peak at the moment. But we're going to get him motivated by having a good team. Going to have Shroud. Obviously I'm going to keep him. He's still very skilled. If I have Freakazoid there as my entry frag, I can still activate Shroud. I can get him back to his level. We've got 3 of the core there, right? Now who else are we going to add in? We're going to add in God B. He's going to be the in-game leader. We're going to write him a blank check and say, listen, forget the Legija shit. I mean, remember, players have to take part in this as well for this to work. God B's going to be the in-game leader. He's going to take over from Sean. He's going to come with a new approach. He's going to get all these other guys an option. He's going to love Freakazoid. Freakazoid's going to love him because he's such a tactical guy and he's going to do what he says. So who's going to be my last guy? Well, I've already got Shroud. I've already got Skadoodle. I've got a lot of firepower. So as a result, as a 3rd man, someone who doesn't even have to be that super skilled, who can be the hybrid guy in the middle, that's why I'm going to bring Tarek in. And I'm going to pay that buyout and I'm going to get him. And in this God B system, he can have a bit of freedom and he can contribute. The games that he has will now be enough with Shroud and Skadoodle and we'll have a very good team here. We'll have a team that's got a good mix of aggression, since we've got Freakazoid and Tarek, and then we've got a good mix of the other style of players. We've got the static players of Shroud and Skadoodle. And then we've got God B mastermind the whole thing. There's a team for you. There's Cloud9. I only had to change 2 players. Now let's go to CLG. So I'm going to keep JDM, obviously. Fantastic AWPer. The best player in the team at the moment. But the thing is, I'm going to give him help. At the moment, his problem is his rifles are so bad, he can't just dominate the whole game. So now I'm going to keep Cutler, obviously. But Cutler's not going to be the straight-up in-game leader. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to go back to the style where he was actually kind of a jack of all trades. He would do a bit of everything. And he was very, very good. He had a passive style of play, but he also could do almost everything in the game and a very consistent player when he was at his peak when FNS was the leader. So we're going to get him back to that. So we have a consistent amount of fragging to go along with JDM. So JDM's big performances with good Cutler performances are going to be solid now. The in-game leader is going to be Sean Gares. Why didn't I just give it to him with a blank check once he left C9? If we could get him together, if he was willing to be part of this dreaming the impossible dream, we can use the resources, let's get Sean Gares as the in-game leader. And now he's got a bunch of players around him who are going to want to do what he says and want to study stuff and want to get better. And some of them are newer guys with the beginner's mind still. And maybe he can get through to them in a way he couldn't with those entrenched guys from Cloud9. So I've got Sean Gares. I'm going to keep Hazed just because I'm not going to go too crazy with the lineup. I don't think he's that great a player. But you know what? We've already got some talent here. He can be just a supportive player. He can just do his job. He's got chemistry with those guys. And he can work in the Sean Gares system. And finally, we need one last guy. So I want someone who's aggressive. I want someone who's going to put frags on the board. 2 candidates I'm going to pick from. I'm going to pick Roka. I think he's a guy who could do it. If he hadn't signed with Call and gotten mind-fucked into that, he could have been this talent that could do this. And he could also help take some of the load off JDM because he could do some fragging and play aggressively. If not Roka, again, since I'm ignoring personality issues, how about Desi? He's a pretty skilled guy. He's a guy who likes to play aggressively, who needs stable people around him like a Sean Gares, like a Cutler, like a Hayes to bring him back down to earth and to put a system around him. Yeah, clearly has some personality issues, but a good player, skilled player. There's my CLG lineup. Now we go to Team Liquid. Nitro, obviously I'm keeping him. He's the best NA player at the moment. Arguable with JDM. Elige, Good entry player. He's coming on leaps and bounds. Has activated Nitro to become so good. Hiko, we're going to keep him. He's the lurker. Well, he hasn't played that style as much, but he definitely can be phenomenal at that style. That's what we're going to have him do. And we're going to have him do a mini bit of in-game leading. Because we're going to have this team set up so well that the in-game leading is going to be very simple. And he's just going to do it from the lurk position where he's getting to watch the game. We're going to have Simple. We've already got him. He's a fantastic talent. He can be one of the best players. He could be a top 5 player in the world if he really got unlocked and was on the right team and had his mind together. And finally, who's my 5th guy? It's going to be Kusta. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Kusta in. I'm going to make him a dedicated AWPer, but not the star of the team. Because I've got Nitro and I've got Simple. So he's just there to be the 3rd best player. Just to frag. Just to hold his spots. To hold his angles. Go to work. No pressure on him because he's going to learn from these veterans. And Nitro and Simple are going to be the stars. And Simple's only going to hybrid AWP and mainly be a rifler. And he's going to, because he has godlike rifles. He's one of the only people in the entire world who's fantastic with the AWP, fantastic with rifles, and yet is almost like a 50-50 split between the two. Even the ones who do it a lot. So someone like Device, he's more like AWPing a 3rd of the time. Olaf Meister's more like AWPing a 5th of the time. Cajun B's more like AWPing a 4th of the time. JDM's like AWPing all the time, but okay, that's a ridiculous example. He's not a good rifler. So you can see, Simple could do this, definitely, and he could be the hybrid AWP second option. And we're going to give Kustias comfortable AWPing. Look at these 3 lineups compared to the lineups that exist now. Yes, there's the problems of the buyouts and all that. Everyone else each person involved in these situations put themselves in those situations. They weren't having this mentality of going towards greatness. They were just thinking of themselves today and tomorrow. That's all they thought about. So if NA dreams the impossible dream, it is possible. It's not impossible. It's just impossible right now because of the self-constructed barriers and paradigms that NA players have created for themselves.